Aloha to you all, dear fellows of ASC 13-1. It's Ruben Azizian again. Just to remind you, in our first session last week, we talked, or I talked most of the time, unfortunately, but hopefully we'll hear from you, or we are already getting some messages from you. We talked about the security environment. Today, the complexity of the security environment, the new trends, the issues that keep security practitioners awake, keep us motivated, and keep us inspired also to do new things. Today, as promised, in the second session of our conversation, I'd like to focus primarily on the global governance issues, global institutions. We have 10 minutes or so, understandably, this will not be a very comprehensive overview discussion, but I'll just touch upon some of the, again, important trends, issues, controversial maybe aspects of global governance for our general awareness and understanding and discussion. Again, I realize that some of you are probably more experienced on global governance issues. Some of you have worked perhaps in the United Nations and regional organizations. Others have not. And therefore, I'll offer you kind of both a basic overview of where we are, but also introduce some, as I said, problematic issues in terms of global governance. So when we talk about global governance, I think certain things come to my mind that are, I think, are really important for the understanding of the global security governance or security architecture. What we have is a combination of the old and the new. We have an element of continuity because the world suddenly doesn't become absolutely new. We don't change overnight our security practices. We don't change overnight our security institutions, even if we think they need to be changed. As you realize, we are in a world of so many nations with so many priorities and interests. So when we talk about security governance, we definitely appreciate the importance of the United Nations Security Council, which remains the preeminent body in the world today in terms of shaping our security responses to most immediate and most challenging security issues. But along with that, along with the legacy of the old days when the Security Council was the key institution and continues to be, what we are seeing is what some would call kind of a certain democratization of the international security environment. And that means that other bodies are stepping up. As our security is becoming more comprehensive, therefore, there is more need for more players, more actors, and more institutions to offer their perspectives and offer their help in dealing with security issues. You probably know there was a forum of the G7, the economically most advanced countries in the world, that was looking at some strategic issues. Today we are talking about not just G8, but also G20, and more and more countries are getting involved in this global security governance. We're talking about increased role of specialized agencies, such as the World Health Organization. We hear from time to time and very regularly about major epidemic challenges, and that is health security has become a very significant security challenge to the world, and organization like WHO becomes more and more involved. The other day, North Korea conducted its third nuclear test, and which brings to mind the importance of the IAEA, the international agency that deals with atomic energy issues, and that is another sign. In the Asia-Pacific region, we are increasingly concerned about the maritime security issues, and one of the global organizations that can and should be helping in mitigating the maritime security challenges in the Asia-Pacific is IMO, the International Maritime Organization. So what we are seeing is a proliferation of these activities of specialized agencies that are not just focusing on the military or conflict side of security, which the Security Council does, but in a broader range of issues. And then what we are seeing again is growing collaboration between global and regional organizations. And some would say that global organizations like United Nations are incapable of performing effectively without interaction with regional institutions. And we have examples in many parts of the world. You talk Afghanistan, you see United Nations and NATO working together. You look at the African conflicts, you see United Nations and Organization of African Unity working together. So this is another important trend in global governance. Now, looking at the United Nations, which continues to be the most universal organization, you will have an exercise dealing with UN in the course, and that's another reason I'd like to spend a few minutes with you talking about the United Nations, which includes today 193 member states. Last time I checked, although you have to keep checking the numbers all the time, because we are, witnessing also a proliferation of new countries and new states. UN is not just about peacekeeping and peace building, but it is about a wide spectrum of issues, and some of them I already mentioned. They have to do with economic and social issues and so forth. There are 6 principal bodies in the United Nations. One is currently not functioning, the Trusteeship Council, but the other 5 are functioning and contributing to global security governance. Security Council is one, General Assembly is the other one, which is a very important assembly of countries that come together to discuss issues that are of most concern to them. The General Assembly, unlike the UN Security Council, cannot adopt binding resolutions. So the resolutions of the General Assembly, if they have to be executed and enforced, will have to go through a Security Council process. But we shouldn't underestimate the importance of an opportunity for so many countries to come together and build some common understanding of security priorities. This is an opportunity for the large and the small to meet in the General Assembly hall and express their country's priorities and expectations of global governance. The role of the Security Council, as I said, is paramount in terms of enforcement of particular sanctions or actions, punishment, penalizing states that don't need, they don't follow the rules that are set in the UN security and in the United Nations Charter or international norms. And of course, there is the Secretary General of the United Nations who heads the Secretariat. Currently, the Secretary General of the United Nations is one of our regional representatives, Mr. Ban Ki-moon, who represents South Korea. And I think that's another good sign that Asia-Pacific is increasingly important in global and international affairs. But we have to be also realistic about the United Nations and its limitations and constraints. Sometimes there are expectations of Secretary General being kind of acting as kind of an executive CEO on its own. We of course know that United Nations is an organization of states, of countries, and therefore Secretary General serves the interests of the countries that are members of the General of the United Nations, and therefore he or she cannot kind of come up with their own personal policies or activities that have not been approved by various bodies of the United Nations. So what are some of the controversial issues with the UN? One, of course, is the role of the Security Council permanent members. There are 5 permanent members in the Security Council of the United Nations. They were all the countries that you remember when the UN was founded after the Second World War, it was the victorious powers, the powers who won in the war, United States, UK, France, Russia, Soviet Union then, and China became the permanent 5. And then there are 10 non-permanent members of the Security Council that serve a 2-year period, and they are replaced and they represent different regions. So this year we have 3 countries from the Asia Pacific that represent the region in the Security Council, and they are Pakistan, South Korea, and Australia, that are non-permanent members of the Security Council. So one of the criticisms of the UN Security Council is that it is being dominated by the permanent 5, that has become an elitist club. In 2004, the previous Secretary General convened a group of advisors to advise on the future of the Security Council and perhaps look at reforming the Security Council, expanding maybe the membership. There are 4 countries that are have clearly articulated their interest in becoming permanent members of the Security Council, and those are India, Japan, Germany, and Brazil, and also a country from African continent, and that could be either Nigeria or Egypt or South Africa. But there is no consensus about the membership of the Security Council. There are countries that are arguing for more membership, and there are others that believe that the current status quo, even if it is not perfect, serves security and peace in the world better than bringing new members. Besides, some countries, including powerful countries, have objections to the inclusion of the new members. The other question is the veto power. The 5 have the veto power, and that is being seen as also sometimes not working in the interests of a wider international community. But the counter-argument is that without the veto power, the situation can become a little chaotic and harder to reach a consensus with the participation of the most influential countries in the world. There are other criticisms of the United Nations that have to do with the effectiveness of its resolutions, that some resolutions, that many are not implemented. The United Nations is often reactive rather than proactive. It is not really very effective in preventing conflicts. You probably heard about many scandals that had to do with the financing and the funding and the abuse of funding in the United Nations. So I'd like to end this with my comment that we have what we have, and the global governance clearly is not something that we are, fully comfortable or happy with, and we need to continue to debate and discuss how can we all collectively shape global governance. And I think if we are talking about Asian century, that also includes an element of Asia Pacific's increased influence in international affairs, an increased role in shaping this global governance and the role of the United Nations. So let me end this session with 2 questions for you. My first question is, what is your perspective on the membership of the UN Security Council and the veto power of its permanent members? You can share your own personal perspective, or you can share your country's perspective, or talk about a debate in your country related to this issue. And my second question is the Asia-Pacific region represented adequately in the UN Security Council? Do you think there should be more Asian countries in the UN Security Council? Primarily, I mean the permanent membership. Or it really doesn't matter that much. So thank you very much, and I'll see you again for our 3rd session, which will focus on Asia-Pacific regional governance issues. Goodbye. Again.